3, 2, 1, los geht's. Moin und hallo, herzlich willkommen. Hier ist eine neue Folge. Podcast ist echt nicht einfach. Mein Name ist Dan und ich freue mich sehr, heute einen wundervollen Gast bei mir zu haben. Benjamin Richter ist hier. Er ist Jongleur, Tänzer, Dozent und vieles, vieles mehr. Und wir wollen heute ganz viel über seine Arbeit reden. Unter anderem über sein Projekt Taktil. Da geht es um ein Glas, ein Seil, jede Menge Blöcke und, was habe ich vergessen?
Ein Lavastein.
Ein Lavastein. Also, bleibt dran, hier ist Podcast, ist echt nicht einfach. Hallo alle wieder zurück, schön, dass ihr wieder dabei seid, liebe ZuhörerInnen, liebe ZuschauerInnen, ob hier auf YouTube oder auf allen Podcast-Catchern dieser Welt. An dieser Stelle vielen Dank an alle Patreons, die mich unterstützen, entweder drüben auf patreon.com oder aber auch hier als Kanalmitglieder auf YouTube. Vielen Dank, ohne euch wäre das Ganze nicht möglich. So, und jetzt kommen wir aber sofort zu unserem Gast. Benjamin Richter ist hier. Hallo Ben, schön, dass du da bist.
Hello, nice to be here.
Genau, wir würden nämlich dieses Gespräch auf Englisch führen. Kann sein, dass wir uns ab und zu mal wieder ins Deutsche verirren, aber wir sind uns sicher, dass ihr da draußen alle der englischen Sprache ebenfalls mächtig seid. Und wir haben herausgefunden, dass das Vokabular manchmal auf Englisch, vor allem für Ben, einfacher ist, über die Themen zu sprechen, über die wir sprechen wollen. Also, we talk in English from now on.
Whoa.
Ben, nice to see you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming to the show.
It's my pleasure.
It was really spontaneous. This is like the most spontaneous podcast episode I've ever did. Because I think I was lying in bed like 1.5 hours ago. I told you the story, so I came quick to the studio and we built everything up. That because you are in Cologne right now.
I'm in Cologne right now.
And you are here for a purpose, because you play your piece Taktil.
Exactly, as part of the German-wide Zeit für Zirkus festival.
Which is the equivalent from the Nuit du Cirque.
Exactly, so there's circus all over Germany in various different venues and cities. And I'm here playing in the Haus der Architektur, the architecture house, which is a white cube that seemed to have fallen out of the sky onto a little modern central square next to the library in the middle of town. And Jenny Pachowski saw this square, about this cube, about 5 years ago, and thought, Benjamin Richter needs to play here. And now it's happening, so wonderful.
This place is really, environment is really special, like, because you also like work with these structures and with these cubes, so it reflects also a little bit like structure in our environment, which makes it like sort of special.
Yeah,
it's really small, the room, you told me.
It's less than 7 meters by 7 meters, so it's a very intimate space. It's I have a playing area of 4 by 4 meters centrally in the middle of the room, and people sit on the walls on little cardboard stools around the edge. So it's very intimate.
So
and
exactly, so they're really close to you.
They're very close, they can see every little detail, every movement, and they can hear every breath. And I really like this kind of sensitivity because, I mean, that's a lot what the piece is about. Taktil is very much about listening to details, turning up the volume on your own sensitivity and taking care.
For all the non-jugglers or people who don't know you, they can hear our first interview, because there is already a podcast with both of us, which we did last year for the same reason, for the Zeit für Zirkus, Nuit du Cirque, but it's only audio, so you can hear it. You can find it on www.zeitfürzirkus.de, and then you watch there from last year, 2021. So then you can find it, and then you can also like find more information about Ben if you want to, so that we don't have to repeat the same discussion
the same stuff
we already had. But for people who don't know what is not the work of a juggler, because Taktil is not a juggling piece.
Well,
it's more like object manipulation.
Yeah, depends on your definition again.
Okay, right. So that's the discussion from last time. So what can somebody, if you need to explain somebody what he's going to see there, what would it be?
Well,
how would you describe it?
Yeah, I will try and keep it short.
Yeah.
So I am a juggler and a dancer and a performer. I build sculptures in Taktil with between 40 and 60 white blocks, like gallery pedestals of different sizes and shapes. I have 3 other objects, a wine glass, a stone, and a little piece of rope. So I build sculptures in the combination of these things. But the way I build sculptures is obviously the way I move the objects and the way I move myself whilst I'm building the sculptures is in relation to juggling and dance. So there is a particular aesthetic to the process of building the sculpture. It's not only about the sculpture at the end, although it is about that, of course, but it's about, what I just said, the aesthetic of the process of building the sculpture. So it's about the journey there, and that contains elements that sometimes are juggling, and that are sometimes very strongly related to juggling, object manipulation, handling the objects with a certain degree of risk. So instead of just picking something up and putting it on there, I might pick it up, throw it to the other hand, and then put it on the top on the sculpture. So there's that's a low element of risk, but it's there. And I increase the level of risk in different situations to create attention. And I treat the objects very, very carefully, which I think most jugglers do.
It's interesting because risk is always playing a big role in like circus activities and in juggling in particular, as you're always playing with like the mistake. And the more risky you get, the higher the possibility to have like a mistake lies there. Is there space for mistakes in your piece?
100%, yeah. Because in the piece it's also, there's several things that this piece is about, so it's very difficult to say it's about this one thing. One aspect of it is that I'm looking for, in English I would say, a non-hierarchical dialogue between me and the objects. Thinking about a classical juggler who stands in the middle of the ring and dominates the objects and puts himself or herself in the position of a superhero. If they make a mistake, then this status goes down very, very quickly.
Exactly.
Because they're dominating the objects. They're saying, look what I can do with these things. And for me, it's a conversation. It's understanding the dynamic of a human and the objects moving with each other and influencing each other. And through this conversation, I wish to very subtly raise awareness of the value of objects and the different qualities, this word agency in English, which is the ability to have an effect on something, the ability to do, actually. Of course, an object doesn't do something by itself except exist. I'm getting philosophical quite quickly.
That's all right.
But through its very existence, it has an effect on the world because of its qualities, its shape, its tactility, its whatever, the sound it makes when you touch it, these things.
It's work about relation between body and object and environment.
Body, object, space, yes.
Yes. Is there a space for improvisation as well?
100%, yes.
Yes. So how can I imagine that? Do you take also like the vibe from the audience and play with like what they... Because I didn't saw it. I need to say that. So I ask stupid questions for everyone who has seen it. But is it like that you can like play with the mind of the audience, that they expect you something to do, but you can break it or
Absolutely.
not? You can fulfill it or not?
That can happen. It's a very, very open format. Because I've been doing the work for quite a long time, certain ways of manipulating the objects or certain movements, even certain kinds of sculptures come back. But actually, in an ideal scenario, is everything happens from my perception, my sensory perception in the moment. So I become aware of a certain quality of an object, I interact with that object and move it in a certain way. And this establishes a pattern of movement that I then follow and find variations of. This is then the juggling thinking. So maybe I'm moving a wooden block in 90 degrees. cluck, 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 cluck. And this becomes cluck, 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 cluck. And then there's another block maybe that is also cluck, cluck, cluck. And I am moving in cluck, cluck, cluck. And so the first level is the sensory perception that happens between me and the object. And especially in this situation in the Haus der Architektur in Köln, people are sitting very close. So sometimes I'm moving an object in relation to how people are sitting.
Yeah.
And this is how the connection happens to the audience. And of course, as I'm not trying to be a superhero, I'm just very interested in very real human contact in a performance, not any kind of stylized or acted sort of over-presence, but I'm interested in a very natural contact. So this happens. And maybe I will just be with somebody or look at them or just sit next to them or whatever for a while. And it will become a scene in itself.
Normally when somebody goes on stage, either you have planned exactly what you want to do, so you know exactly what you do, or you need to be like, and it sounds more like your idea of it, like so open to what's going to happen that you don't stack ideas already.
Yeah, well, it's a mix. Because the principles that I work with are very clear and very prepared.
So you can always come back to them.
Yeah, but it's not I don't have a plan for the material. Or, like I say, sometimes the material repeats itself, but it's not planned. It's like I'm in a state of openness and going with the flow, being in sensory perception. And then I will notice a situation that I recognized before. Then I have the choice to follow the situation I recognized before if it feels logical, or I have the choice to ignore it and say, oh no, I'm not going to repeat this habit. I'm going to wait for something else to go along, make another choice. So that's a little bit the negotiation I have with myself as a performer, but that's not obviously that's not about the experience of the audience unless they've seen the show 10 times. So in relation to the audience, I'm looking to just be in presence.
You also call it like performance, which like reflects exactly what is this. It's not a show. It's not like
It's a performance.
It's a performance, exactly. Do I see there a Ben Richter, or do I see a juggler, or do I see a version of Benjamin Richter?
This is interesting.
Which is my question. So what is your stage character? Because even if you don't have one, you have one.
You know what
I mean?
Obviously. I know exactly. So there is a particular... I find the word character often problematic because it implies a certain level of theatricality and a certain level of... I don't mean this in a nasty way, but pretending. And I'm looking to not pretend, but I'm looking to share a very particular state of being. And I'm aware that when things are going the way that I want them to go, the way that it's planned, then I land in a very particular state of being. Obviously, the audience sees this state of being and they can perceive that as a character. Because I'm not always like that. Sometimes I'm clumsy as well. Sometimes I'm, whatever. So it's a kind of a designed state of being, one could call it. There is a plan behind that. At the same time, I'm always looking in the moment to allow other states of being to arise if it feels relevant and logical to what's going on in that particular moment. So there are different nuances of me that I enjoy sharing. Sometimes it becomes more playful, almost... Do I use the word? Do I dread to use the word clown?
Yeah, all right. So it was
not clown, but just like I say, not acting. It's not clown. It's very close to using clown principles.
There is this German word was called like Situationskomik. It's just in this moment where it's funny. It's not pretend to be funny. I don't tell a joke, but I act in a different way in this situation. But for you as well as it's like funny for
it's a particular kind of context that there was a situation yesterday in the performance where I built a sculpture where I had these 40-50 white blocks lying on the floor and they were just leaning on each other, and it made like it was a very poetic moment, and it was like a wave, and it was very beautiful, and I felt like everybody in the room was totally with me. Everybody was really quiet and really, oh my God, this is good. And I was thinking, oh, okay, this is great. Oh. And then I took another block and I stood it up. And this block was maybe 60 centimeters and quite big and heavy. And I have these very, very mini blocks. And I just leaned a mini block on this one. And for some reason, this made people laugh. Because it was the context, the relationship between all of these other blocks leaning and then just one little one going clonk. So there is a certain humor in the nature of these objects that I like to play with. And I like to play with principles of humor, principles of clown and timing without being a clown.
Yeah, but contrasts are always also like a clown method.
Yes.
So what you describe now is for me sounds like playing with the contrast
absolutely
of the forces of the size of the objects and of the timing as well, which is super important.
I'm doing
because you need to take like a build up, like in a good joke you have like a build up, and then there comes a joke,
exactly,
and here's the same, like you have first this beautiful lying wave, which is the build up for the small.
Exactly, it was I mean the process happened over 15, 16, 17 minutes. So it was a very slow joke, but it worked, and that was very pleasing. I'm drifting off for a moment. I'm doing another project with Cox Alas, which is about deconstructing clown for exactly this purpose, finding out what is contemporary version of clown, without nostalgia, without referring to traditions, but isolating principles, and then making some work with them. We see what happens. We've been interviewing different people about clown, and we interviewed Joanna Bassi, sister of Leo Bassi, very famous clown, and she's a very famous clown. And she had a wonderful definition of laughter, which I just thought of it as you were speaking about what happened with the build-up and the timing and the change that happens. And she said, well, laughter is a physical reaction to a very gentle shock.
Yeah.
I really like that.
That's really nice.
A gentle shock. It's just something that is just a little surprise that makes you go, ooh.
I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. That's funny.
That's why it's funny.
Yeah.
Is there, before Tactile, some sort of introduction to the people? Or is there a piece of paper which you can read? Or is there a speak before, or is there like a host who's just introducing you and your work so that the people get into the context?
It depends on the situation. For yesterday, I wrote a little text on a very small piece of paper, which is to get people into the state of being a kind of equal to each other and to all of the other objects. I think in my work often as of the human body as the object that we live inside, and that helps me to communicate, to interact on a more equal level with other objects. So I wrote a little text as an introduction for this, where it starts, hello humans, we are words. We would like to welcome you, and blah, 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 blah. So just the fact that you read, we are words, it's like, oh, the words are talking to me. And it puts you in a particular state of listening, maybe a kind of special kind of attention.
Yeah. Or seeing like different details which you wouldn't see.
Yeah.
If you're not like
to sensitize. But it is also a performance where one needs a lot of patience as well. If one comes in expecting kind of, okay, he's going to boom and he's going to tack, 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 and it's going to really, he's going to tell us exactly what to think and what to do all the time. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'd like you to first of all just arrive and to just be and relax and slow down and to perceive.
How do you claim these rules? Because there are like all these rules, like what is the audience, what they are supposed to do, what can they do, what should they not do?
By example, I don't tell anybody what to do. And especially in this longer version, people are free to come and go.
The longer version is like 2 hours.
Yeah, it's up to 4 hours.
Up to 4 hours, yeah.
Here I'm doing 2 hours because that was a better fit for the rest of the program of the festival. Sometimes it's 30 minutes, sometimes it's 1 hour, sometimes 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours, depending. The people come, when they know it's long, people come with a certain, people bring a certain patience with them, I think.
If they know it, for sure.
If they know it's good, long. And I do enjoy provoking a little bit people's impatience and saying, no, I'm not going to bow to your thirst for absolute entertainment and not thinking about anything for your desire for consuming.
Yes.
I want to just be with you. Let's just be here together, and stuff will happen, and it's going to be nice.
This fits also to what you said about the superhero stuff, and
Exactly.
so that you like have like a disadvantage of like I'm here up here, the artist, everybody's watching me here, you as an audience, and so you bring more like just to one level. As humans love and enjoy to watch humans.
Yes.
So as we are all humans, just stay here and watch.
Yeah, exactly.
And everything can happen.
One of the things that I like very much to do at the very beginning, which unfortunately I forgot to do yesterday, but so it was interesting as well. But
you got another chance tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things I love to do is to just, first of all, before I do anything else, is just to sit there and look at everybody, and not in a big, deep psychological, big meaningful way, but just to look at people in a very neutral way.
I'm aware that you are here.
I'm aware that you're here. It's nice. And sometimes when you look at somebody, then something happens in you. Maybe you smile together. Maybe someone feels uncomfortable. Then I'll look away. I'll go to somebody else.
Yes.
But just to acknowledge their presence and to acknowledge this dynamic of I know that you know that I know that you know, which is what's happening on stage all the time. Yeah. This feedback Schleife.
Yeah. So, but if you look at like in a theater way, the fourth wall is always open. So you're always aware from your audience, and your audience is always aware that you are aware of them.
I am never pretending that they're not there.
Exactly.
Even if there can be a half an hour when I'm not directly in contact with them, but I'm always aware that they're there, and I always want them to feel that I know that they are there. I'm not hiding from something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever lose control inside your performance, where like the audience does something you would not like expected, or where something went wrong, which is totally nothing to do with yourself, but with like the environment?
No, not in this piece. Not yet, because everything is okay. Everything that happens is fine. It can sometimes it's extremely slow. Sometimes it can be very fast and chaotic. And there can be moments, I speak a lot about caring for the objects. But of course, in a performative sense, sometimes it's useful to create a different dynamic. If I feel the energy is going down a little bit now, then I can be more dynamic, and often that involves being less careful. Things get louder, the blocks fly in different directions.
More risk.
More risk and more chaos.
Yeah.
That's one of the spectrums that I like to work with, is between care and chaos. An example yesterday, a good friend of mine came and very generously took some pictures. And he walked past one of the sculptures, and that was very fragile, and it involved a wine glass. This was just about 10-15 minutes before the end, and it fell over. But it was beautiful. It's like, yes, the glass broke, bam, okay, new objects, wonderful. Yeah. And I was actually very grateful to him for doing that. And it wasn't because he wasn't caring, it was just that the sculpture was so delicate. It fell over. It was a very strong moment. Everybody, ooh, there's a nice tension. What's going to happen now? And then I take the pieces of glass and I start working with the pieces of glass. And they become parts of the sculpture. And that's another sort of example of something that I enjoy sharing, is this process of accepting and making the best out of something.
Yeah, and it continues.
Yeah. There isn't a failure.
Yeah.
Stuff happens, and then you deal with it.
Yeah, that kind of happens. So, beside your work as a teacher on various circus schools, as a performer, a juggler, you also work as a how you say, creative director? Is it like creative support, outside eye? So you work with other artists just to frame it?
To these definitions, that's so tricky.
Hard.
What I'm using at the moment with the project that I'm working with is research and creation facilitator. And that comes quite close to how I feel when I'm doing it. Because most of the projects that I work with are people that are authoring the work themselves, but want some kind of support during this authoring process. So either it's support during the process of research, or it's the process of, research can mean many different things, can be time in the studio, can be reading, or just references from different art forms that I've encountered that I think, oh, have a look at this. This is somebody that maybe thinks similarly to you. And this came before, so have a look at it, read it, watch it, find out what your thing is in relation to that. That's part of the work. So giving people context. Now I forgot your original question, I'm just going on.
It was about what is the right word for describing it, and now you just describe what your work is, because it's so different from perspective and from artist to artist.
Yes.
There are some really famous people. You work with Wes Peden, with Guillaume Karpovic, with Nielsen Malte, Spot a Drop. Other people I forgot now. So how can I imagine how this works? So they're Guillaume, for example. He has his style, he has his tricks pattern, he has his stage character as well. At what point you come in, at what point you watch what he's offering, and then how does it work? What do you say to somebody like that?
Well,
or how
with Guillaume, it was a longer process. It's not so typical of what I do these days, but it was the longer process because I was his teacher, or one of his teachers at the school in Stockholm. He came to the school with a very, very high level of technique in Diabolo already. As I have virtually no idea about Diabolo, but I know a lot about moving with objects. We worked very much on that, the dynamics of moving with objects. And Diabolo often lands in a two-dimensionality due to the nature of the technique. So that was the thing that I was personally interested in. How can we mess around with the two-dimensionality and make it three-dimensionality? And I just made a few suggestions for him to play around with. He played around with them and then would come back in the next, during the lesson, or would by himself, and then come back in the next lesson and show me what he finds. And then I look at it and think, okay, now what about this? What about this? What about this? So with him, I was asking a lot of questions, and he came with a very clear aesthetic idea, which was very much based in this sort of hip-hop dance style called tutting.
Yes.
Start, stop, very sudden movements.
Yes.
And little surprises. So it was really a combination of his journey, which was already started, and supporting him on that. And that's basically my philosophy as a project supporter, facilitator, is that I want to firstly help people get more conscious of what it is that they're doing and what it is that they want. Secondly, the relationship of their own work with the things that came before them and other things that are around them. Because I don't think it's useful to think of oneself reinventing the wheel all the time, or I'm this genius who had this amazing new idea. I don't think that's a useful way of thinking. It takes away from community, but it also takes away from the own work, because you tend to ignore people who have perhaps gone much, much further with the process, that you can learn something from, that you can exchange with, that you can go along with. So that's the second part of it. And then sometimes the work is more choreographic. So I have very particular principles that I work with choreographically. Sometimes it's more about dramaturgy. Sometimes it can be more about particular states of being on stage. Okay, how do you want to design that? How do you want to appear? It's kind of all aspects of everything that I've encountered over the last 33 years of doing this work.
I think it makes like a big difference if you come like in the beginning, in the middle, or in the end. To it, which makes like a I think big difference on how many influence or how much you like already is there on material, or are you, as you said, in the process of research where the material first comes and then we go along with it.
And different people need different things. Sometimes it's useful for me to work with people just at the beginning, and then they work with somebody else for the final the final creation phase, and that's fine. You know, it's got to be appropriate to what they want.
I just imagine in my head like the difference between like working with Wes Peden and Guillaume Karpovic, which are like completely different, at least stage characters.
Absolutely. Well, with Wes, it was a situation where, I mean, I was his teacher in school as well. And then years later, for the production that he stopped playing now, called Zebra. I should say it in American because he's American. In English, we say zebra.
I think
for some reason
it is zebra.
Zebra, but he calls it zebra because he's American. Whatever.
But I think the African people, they say like different.
Zebra.
I think we all just mess it up. It's you need to ask a South African. He will tell you how it's
right. Oh, cultural appropriation. Anyway, so he came to me a few years after the school and said, "Hey, I've got all this material that I've put into sort of an order.
It's a lot.
I need some help to make some kind of sense of it, to pull it together into being a piece." So we met, I think it was only 4 days in the studio, like 2 weekends, whilst I was in Stockholm, and worked on it, and gave it some kind of form, and incorporated a couple of other objects, and just made the objects that he was using have follow a certain kind of logic that he was looking for. And that's the thing. It's like I want to support the logic and the principles that the people are looking for themselves or already have themselves. Of course, when I'm doing that, I refer to my own principles. That's clear. But I don't want to put those on top of them, because I want the world to be enriched by their ideas, by their work. So in order to stop myself sort of putting my ideas on top of people, I developed a strategy that becomes more about asking questions than giving answers.
That's nice, because you always pose a lot of questions, also about the juggling. Also in your work with Eric Albeck and Jay Gilligan and Luke Wilson in the, what is it called, Manipulation Research Laboratory. Where you also like discuss about like what's that? What's juggling? Why does that exist?
It's still going on.
And what does it does with you or with your environment? Like, what is your perspective right now? Because I think also it changed between the years. What you thought like when you were young about juggling and
absolutely. So
discovered.
So the journey. A quick recap of the journey so far. That started from understanding that the different classical juggling props wanted to be wanted to be. I know it sounds a bit pretentious, but that's just the way I say it. The different classical juggling props wanted to be juggled in different ways, or that just jugglers did handle different juggling props in different ways. So a club and a ball and a ring get juggled differently. Basta. Of course, there's some things they have in common, but in general, the objects get treated differently. So from there, long story short, I developed that idea into working with every kind of object through the language of objects method that we spoke about last time, I think.
Yeah.
And through this encountering of many different kinds of objects, obviously many different questions arose in me about that. And I had a conversation a few months ago, or maybe it was about half a year ago, with Erik Olberg. He's doing the PhD in Stockholm at the moment, and obviously we talk a lot about juggling together. when we meet, it's not often enough, but we do.
Yeah.
And the question came into my mind: if musicians talk about musicality, what do jugglers talk about? Is it jugglerality, or what's the objectality that gets used in a different context in computer sciences already? Object-oriented stuff, that's a branch of philosophy, but also of programming. And so the thought came into my head: if a musician has a particular sensitivity to tone and rhythm in the world, like if John Cage spoke about a musician hearing a track differently to a non-musician. What does it mean for jugglers? What is this relationship, this very particular kind of relationship that draws to objects, that draws people to juggling, to being fascinated by composing objects in time and space? That's a big question at the moment that I'm very curious about.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, like for instance Craig Quatt, he knows about the psychology of things as well, and I'm very curious to exchange with anybody who has any kind of thoughts about that. And there was a master's student a few years ago in Stockholm that I was accompanying as well, and she was doing work. Her project was called the Oxytocin Project, oxytocin being the hormone that is activated in connection, human-to-human connection, but also human-to-animal connection. She swam with whales for 3 months and researched this.
Whoa.
Human-plant connection is also proven. I wonder about human-object connection. What is that? Is that oxytocin as well? Is there another hormone involved there? Is there a... What's going on, scientists? I want to know.
Yeah.
That's one aspect of it, obviously. But there is also just it's very, very multifaceted, this relationship that we have as jugglers with objects. And part of it, I think, is for sure many jugglers may be on some kind of obsessive-compulsive spectrum. I know that I am, certainly. I know that my dear friend, the late great Luke Wilson, certainly was on this spectrum.
Yes.
And it seems to be something that many jugglers have in common, this idea of, I look at how your pen is lying parallel to the edge of the notepaper now, and I think, yep. Would a non-juggler like that, put it down like that? Maybe not.
Maybe not.
I'm curious if certain sculptors have this, or certain, I don't know, maybe certain designers have this as well, graphic designers. There's also a desire for
order.
Order and closure.
Or the mix between chaos and order, or the beauty of the chaos, bringing back to order, going back to chaos.
Yeah, the order in the chaos.
Exactly. I have always, if I see an object, if you give me like an object, I just like to, there's an object, whatever. What can you do with it? Like I say. Yeah. And then like some structures as a juggler, you always like go through, like, okay, where's the balance point?
Yeah.
Where's the center?
Yeah.
How does it roll?
Exactly.
Does it roll?
Yeah.
What does it make if I put it in a
Yeah.
other direction as it's supposed or offered me.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know? What does it do if I just pull it down? Does it roll? Does it move like somewhere?
Yeah.
Where on my body can I maybe put it down?
Yeah.
Or like all these stuff which is going to happen, or like
These juggling
how
questions.
do I can it, like just like if you imagine a pen, like how can I also have like fixed points and move it around these fixed points in space and time?
How can I let or how can I facilitate the object to define space
and to go
example.
through?
Yeah.
So these are all patterns, I think, they come from juggling and from understanding how juggling works and how it affects you, because you just like invested so much time with like, for me, like the perfect object, which is like just a ball.
Yeah.
But you spend so much time with it that you can relate on everything this object can to all the other objects.
Yeah.
Then maybe you make the step to the club, which is exactly the opposite of a ball.
Yeah.
But
dot on the line.
still, it has like a lot of things in common with other objects which are around you. It has like well, it's symmetric in the middle, but from top to down not. So this variation is like it brings like a lot of playing.
Absolutely.
Inside of this.
What you said about what can I do with it? That was a question I had for a long time. And then it really shifted to what does it do to me?
Yeah, exactly. That was what I was saying.
That came from, I mean, like the end of the 80s, early 90s, when jugglers were starting to ask, how does the object move me? When I catch it, what does that do to my body? And that I've expanded that into just the sensory perception of, okay, if I just look at its shape, what effect does that have on me? And then as a performer, how can I amplify what I perceive? When I say amplify, I mean if I perceive, taking the example of the blocks that I work with, if I perceive these 90 degrees, one way to amplify this would be to move in 90-degree patterns, or to look for 90-degree shapes in my body and to give presence to them in movement. There is a point at which you kind of become a mime in these things, and that's something I'm keen to avoid, not because I disparage mime as an art form. Wonderful, it absolutely has its place, but just because I'm looking for something else, because the mime then again becomes more about the human doing the thing rather than an amplification of the object.
I remember talking to Stefan Singh about juggling, and it was more like about, I share a little bit with Stefan the same thing, like I always wanted to present myself on stage, but I was too shy to dance. But the juggling balls were like on one hand like a shield between me and the audience, but for more of that, it was like a reason to move.
Yeah.
And if the ball goes like that, so I need to reach and make my arm long and just change the image of what's happening there.
Sure.
And that is like where we came to this question: what does the object does with you?
Yeah.
So to turn it around in this perspective, that not you are juggling the balls, but you are reacting to where they go, and you try for sure to get them in order, but you can allow yourself just to follow them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if I know it's like a forth and back play from both sides. Yeah. And that I found really, really like interesting, like to think more about movement on stage. Yeah. As for that time, I was really young. It was one of my first big workshops, going to Berlin, going to Stefan. It was like
super
16, 17 years ago. I met Declan. We met there.
Ah, nice.
We were the same hostel. Like that's funny. So that was like before I only knew like the static juggler image, like he's just with 2 feet on the ground, like really like buried in
I do the tricks.
And everything happens like in a window in front of him, or like maybe around his body, but the most of it like is also this 2-dimensional, which you told now about the Diabolos. And then for the first time, like thinking about there is so much space and room to explore there, and if I saw it, I just like, this is so interesting. this is so much more interesting as the physicality perspective of juggling, like just like to, okay, what you can handle, how many numbers, is it a lot, is it not a lot, is the trick high, is the trick low, is it fast, if it's hard. But like it became much more than just showing the objects, and the juggler is more like he just fulfills his work, like, but I'm watching like the patterns, and here it started like to, wow, I definitely watch more the human than the objects,
right?
Or both in combination,
or it's an equality,
which give the aesthetic also. Like. And that was like a really nice beginning for me to think different about juggling. And as you mentioned, Craig, you can listen to the podcast with Craig as well. Find it in this channel. Grease go out.
Hi, Craig.
We talked also like a lot about this flow state of mind, which is like the other side of, or like you said, it's like the social aspect of it, or like the psychological aspect of it, that you can fall like by doing something and by doing something repetitively, and you don't need a lot of stuff for that. Also, it's okay to have like just one object. To come in this like state of flow.
I think juggling is very good at provoking that. I don't know if I use the word flow, but I think of it as a kind of a presence experience that you can tune into. I think there's different aspects, and I would love to have a conversation with Craig about this. For me, there is the presence of the object. The object is a thing that does not change. It just totally is what it is. So by the very definition, object, it just is present as an entity, as a thing that exists in this world as I do. So by interacting with this object, I have the potential to connect to a very particular kind of presence. And maybe, is that what he means? Because this word flow, it gets used a lot in very different contexts. So I'm a little bit wary of it because I find it a little imprecise, but this is my nerdy science brain that wants to be sort of understand things even better. But I get it. This is a state that I can find when I'm dancing. It's a state that I can find when I'm walking through the forest, when I'm rowing a boat on the river, when I'm having a nice conversation. So what is it that's very particular about juggling as a phenomena in regard to this flow? Curious.
For me, like the first time I experienced this this flow situation, I remember I have it like as a child by sitting in the back of the car. My father drove through south of France to our making some holidays, and I had my hand out of the window, and I was playing with the wind and with the friction of the wind in my hand and forming like balls, bubbles, shapes, or just like trying to be a plane. I know like that my mind just like drifted up. I could do this like for hours by thinking of nothing, only having this tactile experience and being there just at this moment, at this time, and everything else wasn't important. Well, I was a child. I think that for children it's much easier to come into this state of no worries, don't think of what's coming, don't stack ideas, or don't prep in the time where you just like, I think we often like, if we have time to do something, we prep. We do a preparation about, okay, what I have to do if I come home, what is tomorrow, what is in a month, what I don't need to forget, what do I need to do today, or as well. As if you are in this state of just like being there and nothing else is important, and I don't stack up ideas. I'm just there to react and to be there. And the most beautiful thing in juggling is that like it doesn't make any sense at all if you just like look on the productivity, which it does.
It's a wonderful anti-productivity gesture.
Exactly, and that's why you come to this flow station where it's like just nothing is really important.
Yeah.
I'm just like here in this moment. I feel my body.
Yeah.
It feels good. I can like drift away with my brain. I feel afterwards. I feel super relaxed, and you really got like you can chase this feeling all around if you could just like regularly train that and just come into this state. I heard it's like a little bit the same, like I think it's a little bit the same as people who are like so good in guitar players, they can improvise on everything. Like they hear something and they just like improvise, they don't think about what they do, but they learn it the same way. Yeah. They learn it also like first this hand does this move and this one does this.
Exactly. First you learn it consciously.
Hard, and then you learn it like, okay, just I can flow around. And they have like the same state of brain in this flow as you are juggling. I think they just already researched that and put people like into.
For me, it has very much to do with just being in a state of sensory perception. In Zen Buddhism and different kinds of Buddhism and different sort of meditation and religious philosophies, it's the sensory perception is just used as a tool to go towards presence. Right? Yeah. A state of being there, which the way you speak about flow and from what I've understood about how Craig talks about it, that's kind of using flow to do the word flow to describe that. Yeah. Right? It's a kind of presence experience through the senses. This is I think there are very many kind of flavors of that. Juggling is one flavor. Yeah,
maybe you can also achieve that with meditation.
Absolutely,
because I think it's really close to meditation.
Anything where you are just perceiving. Yeah, purely perceiving, where there is no judgment, there is no
reason.
There is no reasoning. There is no extra thought going on. It's just pure perception.
There's no goal.
Exactly.
There is no goal.
Because then you're in this wonderful paradox where you're completely in the moment and time is rolling on at the same time. Yeah. And I think that is perhaps why people use the word flow. Because it's a flowing thing. It's like I'm 100% here and time is moving. So there's an
expansion.
There's like a breath that's going on, a three-dimensional thing.
That's super interesting, and we could like talk for hours. Benjamin. As we are already talking like for an hour. So we need to catch up next time. Yeah. So I thank you very much that you came to the show. That wonderful. It happened so simultaneously now that you're in Cologne. What are your next steps? What are your next projects?
My next projects. So next week I have a couple of days of organizing obviously things. So I mean I'm here until Monday, then I'm back to Berlin, and then the week afterwards I'm working in Berlin with a new project that I've just started working with Emma Laule and Anna Jordao. They've built a wonderful structure that I'm not going to tell too much about.
No, they make aerials. They make aerials. Emma Laule.
Aerial project. That's very interesting. Also object-oriented work by aerialists, and that's really exciting. And then afterwards I'll be in Stockholm again and rehearsing with Cox again, the clown deconstruction project, which is called Sahnetorte and Weltfrieden, custard pies and world peace in English, and many things going on.
So if you're like further with your work with Cox together, that's maybe a great topic for coming to the podcast. I would also love to have Cox Alice here, which was also like a big favor. So thank you very much. See you next time around. All the best for you and your work.
Wonderful.
So, das war's mit Benjamin Richter hier im Podcast. Ist echt nicht einfach. Euch allen vielen Dank für euer Interesse, fürs Zuhören, fürs Zuschauen. Und wir sehen und hören uns beim nächsten Mal. Euch allen schöne Zeit. Tschüss. Bis zum nächsten Mal.